After Hours is a 1985 dark comedy from the mind of acclaimed film director Martin Scorsese. In After Hours, we follow milquetoast word processor Paul Hackett, played by Griffin Dunne as he navigates the treacherous streets of late-night New York City. When he meets Marcy, played by the delightful Rosanna Arquette, sister of Patricia and David, his wild night begins. This film lays the foundation for Murphy's Law-style films like Beau is Afraid, Very Bad Things, or even the Safdie brothers' Good Time. Good Time itself even features a poster that references Scorsese's seminal comedy. And as to whether or not I recommend the film, I do. I think that this is a masterpiece of a comedy. Griffin Dunne is a delight from beginning to end throughout the film. The only thing that I would say is if you are a person who gets anxious watching movies like Uncut Gems or Beau is Afraid or Good Time, this probably isn't the movie for you. It is a movie that also features that heavily anxious, anything that could go wrong does go wrong style filmmaking. Now, if you are unfamiliar with the works of Martin Scorsese, we could take a moment to deep dive into him, give an overview of his work. Scorsese was born in 1942 in Queens, New York City. His parents both worked in Manhattan's garment district. He is Sicilian and was raised in the neighborhood of Little Italy, which, as you watch his latter films, you can start to see a lot of that influence in movies like Goodfellas is the most obvious one. He earned his M.A. in Film Communications in 1966 at the New York University School of Film. During this time, he had made sort of a name for himself with some award-winning shorts like The Big Shave and his first feature film, Who's That Knocking at My Door? This is the kind of beginning of him starting to get some attention, and it allowed him to do 1 week of directing on The Honeymoon Killers. Afterwards, he also did a film called Big Bertha, which didn't get as much attention. In 1970, he also worked as assistant director and editor on the documentary Woodstock. He won critical acclaim for his sort of debut film as far as general audiences with Mean Streets. That was the first time he also worked with Robert De Niro. Obviously, Scorsese and De Niro at this point in time are inseparable as far as an actor and a director go. He proceeded to go on to make quite a few films that are notable, noteworthy. Taxi Driver, The Last Waltz, New York, New York. Raging Bull, again with De Niro, Color of Money, The Last Temptation of Christ, Goodfellas, Cape Fear, Age of Innocence, Casino, amongst countless others, including After Hours. Scorsese is considered by some to be the greatest filmmaker of all time, and I could completely understand why. He is a man who effortlessly bounced between religious material, documentary material, comedies, incredibly dark material like Shutter Island. He is incredibly gifted. He has quite the range on him for a director and is still knocking stuff out as recently as 2019. He had also done a TV series recently where he and other fellow New Yorker, also a very famed personality, Fran Lebowitz, just a general hilarious comedian, walk around New York City and talk about how they feel about the place. New York is a thing that breathes and lives through Scorsese's films, and After Hours is truly no different. The film takes place in much of Soho and other parts of New York City as Griffin Dunne's character just tries to get home, and Scorsese was trying to film and produce The Last Temptation of Christ during this portion of time. It is why he relates so heavily to the character of Paul Hackett, played by Griffin Dunne, and the anxieties that he faces as he just tries to get home. All right, to get into the plot and acting of the film, I'd like to start with the acting. Griffin Dunne is wonderful as our main character, Paul Hackett. He is an anxious mess who is incapable of standing up for himself for much of the film and really rides this character, this sort of nervous man, very, very well. Rosanna Arquette as Marcy is just fantastic. She is sort of a precursor to the manic pixie dream girl of characters like Ramona Flowers or Kate Winslet in Eternal Sunshine of the Spotless Mind. Verna Bloom, who appears at the end as June, the woman who hides Griffin Dunne away in a plaster mold of a screaming man, is hilarious. And then Tommy Chong and Cheech Marin, who play the art robbers, who steal that plaster of Griffin Dunne's Paul Hackett, they are delightful as well throughout the film. They only make, I want to say, 3 or 4 appearances, and they're brief each time, but they are funny every single time. It's Cheech and Chong, so it's hard not to be. Linda Florentino as Kiki, the sculpturist, is also fantastic. She makes some pretty hilarious little one-liners here and there. She's very callous and cold, and her character is very mysterious. Terry Garr as Julie, the bartending waitress that he meets later on in the film and invites her up to her apartment, is just delightful. She has a very Lisa Kudrow from Friends-esque vibe, very airheaded and yet very insane at the same time. John Hurt as Tom the bartender is also fantastic. And then Catherine O'Hara, who appears as Gail, the Mr. Softy ice cream van driver, who then proceeds to make Griffin Dunn's Paul Hackett's character kind of a living nightmare. She is really the one who instigates the final act of the film, and she is just delightful as she moves from sort of this whimsical, silly woman who doesn't care much for Paul's situation, then starts to believe that he is the person breaking into these apartments. The apartments being broken into are being broken into by Tommy Chong and Cheech Marin, which is the funniest part, as they then steal him at the end of the movie. This is a film that is just beautifully written. It's structured quite well. Our opening scene mirrors our closing scene. Paul is at work in the beginning, bored out of his mind because of the mundanity of his job, and by the end, when Cheech Marin and Tommy Chong have dropped him off on accident as a plastered-covered man back at his job, it is made apparent that the mundanity of this is most likely going to be life-saving after the kind of insane night that Paul Hackett's character has had. It's difficult to get into the plot of this film as it is a little all over the place while being also at the same time fairly simple. Paul simply wants to get home after spending a bit of time with Marcy's character and discovering that she's a bit of a pathological liar and just a little bit insane. He does manage to get away, but doesn't have enough fare for the train, at which point he winds up at the bar where he does meet our character, Julie, played by Terry Garr. Again, this sort of Phoebe-esque character from Friends who is very airheaded, doesn't know what she wants, simply hates working this job at this bar, and would really like Paul to like her back. It is also at this point where Paul gets the keys to the bartender's apartment, where he is simply just trying to get the keys to the cash register so the bartender can lend him some money. When this does all get sort of worked out, Paul ends back up at the apartment with Marcy and Kiki because he's found one of Kiki's stolen sculptures, or so he believes. It's there that he finds that Marcy has ingested enough sleeping pills to kill herself and proceeds to run away after having called the police and letting them know where she is. He returns to the bar in the desperate hopes of getting back his keys and getting home when he hears from the bartender that he has just gotten a call that his girlfriend has committed suicide that night after a fight that they had. Feels like a major coincidence until we learn that it is indeed Marcy. After this, things continue to spiral for Paul. He eventually gets blamed for the break-ins that Tommy Chong and Cheech Marin have been performing all over town, and again winds up being stolen by them after a woman by the name of June, again played by Verna Bloom, hides him in a plaster mold of a screaming man along the lines of Kiki's sculpture from earlier. It's a movie that is hilarious from beginning to end. It's very dark and it's very anxiety-inducing, but it's masterfully written and it is well structured. Now, as to just some quick final thoughts on the film, this movie is a delight. I was laughing pretty much from beginning to end. Particularly, there's a scene where Griffin Dunn's character has just left the apartment of the bar hostess, and he's complaining that she seems like she's near tears, that there's something completely wrong with her, and the bartender says, "Oh, what's the matter? Is she going to kill herself?" And then right after gets the phone call that his girlfriend Marcy has killed herself. This movie has a lot of very dark comedy in it. If that's not your thing, then you're not going to enjoy it, but if you do, this movie's a delight. It's a romp. Truly enjoyable, terrific performances from everybody involved. Rosanna Arquette, Griffin Dunn, Catherine O'Hara when she appears, Tommy Chong, Cheech Marin. It's a pretty delightful film. Scorsese really knocks it out of the park as far as the comedy is concerned, but I don't really think that should be a surprise. He's probably one of, if not the greatest film director of all time. Cinematography is good. It's pretty straightforward. It doesn't really need to be anything special for this film. And as such, I think it is a masterpiece of comedy, and I'm going to go ahead and give this one a 10 out of 10. Thanks again for watching. I've been Zach, you've been you, and this has been After Hours. If you'd like the video, it would help me out quite a bit. Subscribe, it's free, and it'll keep you up to date with all of my reviews. I'm going to try to put out 5 to 6 a week. That is the goal as of right now. I'm going to do some classics, some new films, and a horror film at least once a week. Thanks so much again, and see you later, Space Cowboy.